Hey everybody, Charlie Stevens here. Thank you so much for joining me for another guitar lesson. Alright, so today we're going to keep rolling on what we've been talking about the past few weeks, which is walking bass. Specifically connecting cowboy chords, in this case in the key of G, using notes of the scale of G, sometimes notes of the chromatic scale, but basically just using single notes in the bass that create motion towards the chords that we're heading to. That's what I'm referring to when I say bass walks, or connecting chords via bass walks. Okay, so that's what we've been talking about in the last couple episodes. And today we're just going to check out a few more possibilities. Okay, so we're going to look at what happens when G goes down to E minor. We're going to look at what happens when E goes up to G. We're going to check out what happens when G goes to D. And we're going to check out what happens when D goes back to G. Okay, so just a few more tricks we can do on some common chords. Okay, so we'll do this a little bit briefly today. So it's very similar to the other two lessons we've done, which was connecting G to C, and we also did one of connecting C to G and also C up to D. Okay, so these are just a few different chords, but it's pretty similar stuff. Okay, so we'll go a little bit quickly today. So the first one is going to be G down to E minor. And to me this is a super important one because I use this a lot in all sorts of different styles of music. Anytime I'm going from G to E. So G, the root of my G chord is here on the 3rd fret of low E. The root of my E minor chord is here on the open string of the low E. Okay, so really, there are a couple notes there in between those two, right? But there's only one note that's actually in the G major scale. Below the scale, F sharp, E, F sharp, back to G. So really, this note on the 2nd fret is a really great connector of those two chords, and I use it all the time. You know, I mentioned in another video about Bob Marley's No Woman, No Cry has some of this in here. That's C going to A, but it's actually the same thing. If you understand what a relative major chord and a relative minor chord are, well, G is the relative major of E minor, and C is the relative major of A minor. Okay, so these are the same ideas. I'm going to shift gears on us just a bit to show you this. And No Woman, No Cry, he goes down to that note in between. C stops on this note, A minor. Right? There's other ways to interpret that as well, but basically this happens a lot, right? The song Landslide does the same thing. Walks between the C down to the A minor. And then the other part does this. Okay, that's G down to E minor. So Landslide has an example of C down to A minor and G down to E minor. Okay, so all that was just an aside. I don't expect you to have figured out what I just played, but if you did, good for you. Okay, we'll maybe come back and check out those songs at another time. But that's just a little bit of a preamble and just to help you realize that you've probably heard these sounds before, and it's super common. So to me, this is a big one. Anytime I'm going from G and the next chord is E minor, I'm most likely going to add this specific walk in there, personally. Okay, so anyway, we're going to do one measure of boom chuck on G with the alternating bass. Okay, and then our second measure, we'll do half a boom chuck pattern, boom, strum, which is 1, 2, and then on beat 3, we'll start walking bass. 3, 4, 1. Now land us to E minor. Okay, so we'll just do one measure of boom chuck on G. Half a measure of boom chuck, bass walk. Full measure of boom chuck on E minor. And we'll just end on an E minor in this case. We would probably eventually go back to G, but just keep this exercise nice and small. We're just focusing on the part that goes from G down to E minor. In the next one, we'll check out how E minor comes back though. Okay, so just a nice short 4-measure thing. Let's go ahead and try that together nice and slow. 1, 2, 3, 4. was example number 1. Example number 2 is the exact opposite of this, basically. We're going to be on E minor, do a measure of boom chuck there, half a measure of boom chuck on E minor, and then we walk backwards. Back to G. Really the exact same thing in reverse, right? That's still adding in that second fret note as kind of a transition between these two chords. That's it. Nice and simple, right? Okay, let's try that one together, please. Nice and slow. This is example number 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. Awesome job. That was example number 2. All right, example number 3. We're going to check out what happens when G goes to D, okay? We're going to do 2 different ways that are sort of variations of each other. So this first one, example number 3, we do a full measure of boom chuck for G, half a measure of boom chuck, and then we go. Okay, because those are the notes in the scale. D is here. If I go backwards through the scale, I get D, my open string, C, my 3rd fret of A, B, on my 2nd fret of A, right? So see how those are in a row? Those are the 2 notes in the scale that come before D. So therefore, I go back 2 beats before I want to arrive on D, and I add those in there, right? So let's check out that measure, the second measure of example number 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. So those 2 notes happen on 3 and 4, so when I arrive on 1 of that next measure of D, 1, I get to the D. Okay? Let's try that one together. Example number 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so in example number 4, it's going to be a lot like example number 3. We're still going from a G chord to a D chord, but instead of that strum, we're going to add a chromatic note. So what is a chromatic note? Chromatic means that it comes not from a major scale, but from the entire collection of notes we have known as the chromatic scale. Chromatic scale means all of the notes. G major scale is sort of a subset of the chromatic scale. So in example number 3, we were using the subset G major, which meant we had a note in between this C before we went to D, right? Because C is here, D is here. We can see there's a note in between them. What note is that called? C sharp, right? The note C sharp is not in the key of G, and that's why we didn't play it before. We were using the scale notes of G to connect the dots. But we can also use chromatic passing motion to connect the dots because really we want it rhythmically to land on D, as I mentioned in the first lesson on this little mini-series about bass walks, right? It's really all about creating an interesting way to arrive where we're going, and it's less about whether or not the notes are actually in the key or not. Helps to be informed by that for sure. But anyhow, basically what we're going to do in this one, instead of in the last one how we went 1, 2 was a strum, and then we went 3, 4. On beats 3 and 4, we played these 2 notes before getting here. Now, instead of that strum, we're going to go 1. On beat 2, instead of a strum, I'll go straight to this 2nd fret. On beat 3, I'll play the 3rd fret. And then on beat 4, I could play the 4th fret. That's that C sharp. And then I play the D on the open string, but we can see the D is also here on the 5th fret, so we can really see this was a 4 notes in a row kind of thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1 we land here. Only we play it on the open string. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So that's the bass walk of, a little chromaticism of getting G to D. Okay, so we're going to do one regular boom chuck pattern. The second measure is just that lick. There's no boom chuck. It's just all boom, 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 chuck, boom, chuck, boom, chuck, boom, chuck, boom. Okay, and then when we get back to G, we'll do another measure of boom chuck, and then we'll just do one strum to end it off. Sound good? So boom chuck, G, full measure, the new lick in the second measure, boom chuck D in the third measure, boom chuck G in the fourth measure, nice G strum to land the plane and end us gracefully out of this exercise. All right, let's give it a try together. This is example number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Awesome job. All right, I got one last example for you today. This is going to be when we are on the D chord going back to G. And there's a ton of different ways to do this. I decided to just show you one for right now. Okay, so we're going to start on D. We're going to do a measure boom chuck. 2, 3, 4. The second measure is just going to walk. This is very similar to the walk we just did in the last one, actually. It's going to be D on beat 1, and then we need to end on G. This time we're going to break the rule a little bit. We're not going to end on this G. We're actually going to end on a high G. Just because there are a few other ways we could do this to get to this G that are a little bit trickier to get your head around, so I decided to just go with this one because it's nice and simple. But yeah, we're going to end on a higher G, which could sometimes be cool, although technically this G is on a treble string, so we're getting into slightly, we're taking a little bit of liberties with the underlying concept by doing this, but it makes sense in this case because we get... finally land on this G, and it sounds really cool, right? So I kind of like that for some variety, but I did want to point that out. It's a little less typical than some of the other stuff we're doing. Okay, great. So that's measure number 2 is going to be open string, 2nd fret. This is actually where the chromatic note comes in this time. F natural is not really supposed to be in the key of G. Then we get to the F sharp, and right next to that is the G. So we have all these 4 notes in a row again, but the last one doesn't look like it, because we're playing it on the open string again. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it, okay? So we have one measure boom chuck D. That lick. Then when we get to G, we start on the G string. Now when I do my boom chuck, I only have 2 strings to strum because my G is ringing. So then I just get my B and E string. It's a really tiny little chord here. Then I boom chuck it to D, right? Usually we go from G down here, and then we strum, and then we go up to D. Well, I started on this G here, so I'm going to go down to D. Strum. Now I get to strum a few more strings if I want. I play D, I can get the G string and these 2 higher ones if I want. Or just still the 2 if I want. I kind of like it with all 3 of them. And then we get back down to this, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's how we're going to end this. So we have boom. Cool, well, let's try that together. That's example number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Awesome job. Okay, that's all I got for you today, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. All of these musical examples are available on my website that you can download and print out or look at on your device and read along with if you prefer doing it that way than trying to listen and watch the video. Both are great, that's why I wanted to give you a resource of that too. Okay, so feel free to practice along with these. And please tune in to the next lesson because we're going to see some of these from the last couple episodes that we've been working on. We're going to put those into a real song next time, and this is where it will really get to be a lot of fun, and you'll see why we'll maybe have to choose certain ones of these because of how many measures of a chord are in a certain song, and then maybe it goes to a specific chord after that. So this is where it gets in a little more reality based. Here I just kind of made these up and said, oh yeah, this chord likes to go to that chord a lot, but it's not really in a song, right? So the song will dictate a lot of these options that we have because it's going to have certain chords that have to happen in sequence, right? So we'll check that out next time. We'll see how we can really put this stuff together. So I look forward to seeing you in that lesson. If you're enjoying this course, please subscribe to the channel. All right, well, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.